Welcome back to It's Your Environment. I'm George Curtis and I have a new guest, my favorite DNR employee, Tim Lizotte. How are you?
Excellent, George. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, you spent a lot of time in Winnebago County and you spent it doing important things, and so I got to know you 10 and 15 and 20 years ago because you were in charge of, among other things, glacial habitat, and I got to know you about your Rush Lake activities. Tell the folks what those duties entail.
Well, I had a trip down memory lane this morning driving up from Delafield. I cut my teeth as a DNR wildlife biologist right here in Winnebago County on Rush Lake, 1999. And my first supervisor took me on a field tour when I started, and we drove on the west side of the lake, and she said, look out there, that's Rush Lake. Part of your job is going to be to try and fix that.
Well, and you did all one person can do. I remember that whenever I look at a map, I see something in glacial habitat, and Tim Lizotte was the engineer there. In fact, some of the properties I formerly owned are in glacial habitat. Explain that to our audience.
Well, my primary responsibilities when I started was as a manager for the glacial habitat restoration area, which was a DNR project really aimed at doing landscape scale restoration. So buying small to medium sized parcels in a checkerboard across the landscape, so that basically keeping green space corridors for wildlife. Things like the focus species were pheasants, ducks, and songbirds. And smack and dab in the middle of all that was this 3,000 acre Rush Lake.
Well, and you didn't stop when your work day was finished. If you couldn't get the DNR to do something you thought they ought to do, you went to the feds. Can you explain that?
Well, we had the GHRA, the Glacial Habitat Program, was a partnership. DNR recognized right at the beginning we'd never do it alone. And the U.S. government, primarily Fish and Wildlife Service, along with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, have a variety of land holdings and conservation programs. So it was really a community effort between those groups and lots of our partner organizations, Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, Wisconsin Waterfowl Association, the Rush Lake Watershed Incorporated as well.
And if you take a map of Rush Lake and take a pen and mark in all of the areas that are not available for redevelopment, that have to be limited to wildlife, and then you take another colored pen of all of the areas that are admissible to the public to hunt, fish, photograph, sketch, or whatever they want to do, really we have the best concentration of protection for the wildlife of any place in the state, and we have the most public land.
It's a treasure trove right around Rush Lake. The Nature Conservancy was also a big player. They have protected a lot of land in the area. So we've done a real good job of mixing rural development with wildlife conservation and public lands.
Well, just recently my wife said, where would you want to live when you retire? And I say, hell, I'm not going to retire, but I want to live right here. Sure. This is as close to heaven as I could get for a guy who wants to take a dog and a shotgun for a hike. Where would it be any better?
That's what I enjoy about this area, is that pretty much anywhere you live, within 15 or 20 minutes, if you have a few hours after work, you can get out, walk the dog, go birding, go for a short hunt, whatever you want to do. But there's a lot of parcels in close proximity to our neighborhoods.
Now, unfortunately for us, Tim Lizotte doesn't live here in Winnebago County anymore. He's moved on to bigger things, maybe not better things. Tell us about your new responsibility.
Well, after I left the Glacial Habitat Program, I became a supervisor with the DNR. I did that for about 9 years in the wildlife program, but more recently got a job that I'm very passionate about, and that's as the public land specialist for our wildlife management program.
Well, we're so fortunate in this state, statewide, to have national forests, state forests, county forests, school forests, that the public should be educated that you can live in the heart of a city and still hunt, take pictures, hike, bike, probably more than any other state except Alaska.
We have been very fortunate. Almost 20% of the land in Wisconsin is publicly owned, and of that about 1.6 million is with the DNR, and our wildlife management program manages just under 600,000 acres of that.
So we have trails for people who want to bike, hike. Almost all of this land is available to hunters or fisher people or people who just want to recreate and enjoy and sit down and read a book.
Yeah, the state of Wisconsin's been very fortunate with the Wisconsin Stewardship program, and that was a program that was designed shortly after, or actually just before I started, that basically takes some bonding, state bonding, and puts that aside for green space throughout the state. And that can be to local municipalities, the DNR buys land, and all of that land is open to hunting, fishing, trapping, and then hiking, skiing, or snowshoeing.
And that was started by two great conservationists, Governor Knowles and Senator Gaylord Nelson, of differing parties, but they saw the protection of the environment the same way, and it's been a wonderful program. But I think you told me off camera it's nearing its end.
It is. It's been exceptionally popular with communities, nonprofit organizations, and definitely the public, which is why we still have it today. But it is set to expire at the end of this budget cycle, and hopefully that will continue into the future.
Well, I received a brochure from the Sierra Club about the federal land that our current president has on the list to sell to oil interests and things like that, and I'm troubled. Now I read that the current administration that's your boss, and I don't want to get you fired, although you got a job if it happens, is doing some of the same thing with respect to state land, that you're in charge of acquisitions. But is it really acquisitions, or is it getting rid of land?
Well, when I started, we had a legislative mandate from the last budget that the department needed to offer for sale 10,000 acres of land. And so I had quite a bit on the second half of that process. And to be honest, I think it was time for us to do a portfolio review. The department's acquired land not only by purchasing, but a lot of donations. Times have changed, staffing levels are lower. So we definitely were able to get rid of some clunkers through that process. It did cut a little deep in some areas, and some people lost their favorite spots, but it was a good time for a portfolio review, consolidation, and we still have funds for acquisition, and we have ranking systems, so we're buying the best of the best, and we're buying land in a strategic manner now, so where we have resources to manage it, and where there's public demand for that land.
So you're telling me there is an intelligence behind the policy? Who's in charge of the policy?
Well, it was a really interesting process. So we had a legislative mandate at 10,000 acres to offer for sale outside of our project boundaries. But we had a really excellent, hardworking team of DNR wildlifers, foresters, fisheries, endangered resources biologists, and we all worked together to basically review all the potential lands to be sold and make sure that we were keeping the best stuff and shedding the stuff that was no longer really significant for conservation or recreation.
I'm sure you have found out the best places to hunt throughout the state, and I don't blame you for keeping a secret. But tell the folks how Rush Lake fits in the grading system.
Oh, I would think if you're a waterfowler, Rush Lake is got to be in your top 5 destinations. Waterfowl populations are doing excellent for, these are some of the good old days, as they say, but because there's a lot of other habitat, ducks are not necessarily as concentrated as maybe they were at the past. And as Brett alluded to earlier, with some of the loss of the bulrush, and Rush Lake is, it's definitely a good destination, but beyond waterfowling, we have several rare birds that can be observed out here. There's incredible turkey hunting and deer hunting, so there's really a variety of stuff that you can do out at Rush.
And I live out here within 5 minutes of where we're standing right now, and I see people 12 months a year coming out, parking their cars and just watching the wildlife, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's not just to shoot.
Oh, absolutely not. Like I said earlier, wildlife observation, hiking, snowshoeing. Some of these properties offer excellent snowshoeing. And what I would like to make sure the guests know is that on the DNR website, if you go in there and search public lands, we have an awesome interactive map that you can scroll and zoom to any part of the state, and all the public lands are going to show up there for you. So you can use that to plan your trip. You can look at air photos, topographic lines, rivers, lakes, marshes, forests. So you can do a lot of your planning on the couch or at the coffee table at home, and then get out there and see what it looks like on the ground.
Doesn't sound like you are going to be moving out of the state of Wisconsin soon.
I've been here almost 25 years and just love the state, so probably not.
We love having you work for all of us. Keep up the great work.
Appreciate it, George. Thank you very much.
And thanks for being on the show.
You bet.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.